Thing aside, anybody has any person with disability as a friend or in their family? You want to tell us who it is and what? Okay, so I think, Ajoy, can you help with the mic? How many people have noticed that I can't see very well? Well, I can't see your raising hands, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have a childhood friend, kind of, who's disabled, and the stigma that is attached to it. I can't notice it because I'm used to her from a very young age. So it's only when we take her out that we notice that it's like the discomfort. She has problem getting onto the trains. Okay, it's like especially trains in India, and it's a complete like normal middle class family which can't afford to uh, give her some privileges that maybe well-off people can afford to. So the discomfort, she always, I don't notice it, and I just tell, okay, we can go in the train, and then she tells me, no, I can't. It's like I'll be such a big discomfort to a lot of people. So that's when I notice that even our trains and the platforms, especially it's like if I'm taking her in the women's compartment, the compartment is in the last, it's like bogie in the train, and there is no platform there. How can I get her? So these are like very basic things, and a big organization like railways, it's like doesn't have anything to do with it, and it's so unfortunate and sad.
Anybody else wants to share a story? Or?
Uh, I have a colleague who is disabled, but I would like to share something else. He was the most active reporter on the team, and on any given day he would log 50-60 kilometers a day. Like he would be traveling that much, and the most enthusiastic, ready to go anywhere, anytime, very bright. I would just like to share this thing. Of course, he had difficulties. Once he fell from a scooter. What do you call that? It's a hunch. I don't know uh, the disability that he has. I don't know the scientific name of it. But if he would fall or all, it could be very dangerous for him, for his spine, because it already had a bend. But that didn't stop him. I would just like to share one thing. Like I had so much respect and I used to depend so much on him that when Anna Hazare was fasting, he was the only reporter in the country who went and located the woman who cooks for Anna Hazare and what he likes to eat otherwise. And so we had a story about what Anna loves to eat.
Right. So, yeah, and I think also Sahana covers accessibility.
Uh, I had a friend in Government Law College when I was doing LLB. LLB. Uh, he's no. He's a person with visually impaired. He couldn't read. He wanted to read all those materials, and Braille text was not available. So he asked me to read all those texts, and got it recorded. And examination time, he used to hear those things, and 2 to 3 semesters I helped him out. After that, he got transferred to Chennai Law College. So I lost his contact. What
Okay.
he's doing, I don't know.
Okay,
And
thanks. So basically, a lot of us are interacting with persons with. We'll go to the next.
Nirmita, I just want to add, since we're talking about accessibility, I was introduced to this subject before I met Nirmita to a friend of mine who's visually impaired. And he works with a newspaper. He edits other people's copies, and I think he does it better than most other sub-editors. And I got interested in this issue specifically because of him. I got, I was amazed at how diligently he used to do his work. And he used to have a lot of problems, especially when getting onto the internet and, specifically internet accessibility. And so that's how I wanted to, explore this particular topic on how people with disabilities really access specifically on the internet.
Okay, thanks. So talking about different disabilities and coming to the subject of access. So clearly there are some, because of some disability, a person is unable to access resources. Okay, let's start by giving some examples of disabilities and trying to identify accessibility solutions which are around us. Should we start with, anybody wants to start? Vision? Yeah, what is the problem? They can't see very well, so what kind of solutions do we give them?
No, I mean, there are certain functions that really don't require vision. You can go by sight, so they may not be disabled with respect to those other functions. So if they start earning money and incomes and supporting a family based on these other functions which actually are not related to vision, so then that is a way to see them as equal members of society.
No. So another way of looking at it is that we want to mainstream everybody, just like other groups. And there are technologies now which can help these people, visually impaired people like me, do the same work that non-visually impaired people can do. So what are the things you see around yourself? Really basic things. Think of something. But not required for visually impaired. We're going disability by disability.
We're talking about technology, sorry.
So for vision, the alternate has to be a touch or a voice. No?
Yeah, I mean,
So
audio.
think what would be, if I want to access a laptop, what would I do?
There is a voice feature now in most of the devices which reads out.
Screen reading technology, yes. Text, yeah, okay. Can you think of some thing on your mobile phone, for example, something tactile? Tactile? On everybody's phone, everybody has an accessible feature there. Nobody's noticed? There's a raised dot on 5. There are 2 dots on your keyboard. Okay. Braille signs on lifts, maybe? Or the lift saying 12th floor, when you reach the 12th floor. Okay, so that's some examples for vision. For hearing impaired, what do they need? Visuals, yes. What? So how do you do it in technology? Display boards. Public spaces, we need display boards. So you just have announcements in an airport, you need some visual representation of what you're saying. Especially during emergencies. Sorry? Yeah, that's good. So I will play a very short film on, short video on what captions are. And then we go on to the next disability. You can move the mouse like that. You can move it with your hand. It's called eyes. It's called eye pointer. You can move it with a mouth stick. You can move it with a head wand. Again, you move the mouse and you click. There's a switch. Predictive text. Again, and these solutions are across multiple disabilities. Cognitive. Some solutions work for everybody. Very simple layout and design. It will not confuse people with cognitive difficulties. Something which is pictorial will be easy for them. So if you're talking about a mobile phone, if you have a pictorial address book, it will be very easy for them. And that's the same thing for illiterate people as well, not just people with cognitive disabilities, right? So all these, you have the video ready. Okay, wow. Okay.
You know how it is. You upload a video and an awful lot of people can't understand it. That may be because they don't speak your language. Flea flackety flaw. Or because they have a hearing impediment. Or because their speakers suck. You take the lead to... Whatever the reason, you can provide captions. One way to do that is to use your video editor to add them directly into the video itself. Hello, my name is Andrew. But that becomes difficult if you want captions in more than one language. Hello, my name is Andrew. This type of caption is called open captions. A much better option is closed captions, which you can offer in a variety of different languages, and users that don't need them don't need to see them at all. You need to prepare your files in either subrip or subviewer format, one file for each language. If you are a bit of a geek, you can use a simple text editor and easily produce your own files, but if not, there's software available. For example, CaptionTube, which you'll find online, will help you make captions for your already uploaded YouTube videos and is completely free. You then take the files that you have and upload them to your video and select a language for each one. Even that's a little bit complicated, but if your video happens to be in English or Japanese, you can use a simple text editor to write a simple transcript. And YouTube will use speech recognition software to work out exactly how to display the subtitles. If a video has closed captions available, when it starts playing, you should see a CC button appear down here on the toolbar somewhere. Activate it and you'll switch on subtitles. If you need to select a different language, simply mouse over that button again and a menu will pop up. If the uploader hasn't provided captions in your own language, then you may be able to use Google Translate to translate the captions into a language that you understand. On some websites you may see the old embeddable player. Start the video playing and then mouse over this button to find the CC button. And that's it! Happy captioning!
So that's a lot of information, even if you don't note all of it. I think the idea is clear. So what we've been doing now is trying to identify solutions for problems which arise out of different disabilities. We will concentrate in this session on ICT accessibility because we are talking about the internet and ICT is helping you to access the internet. But just to give you a brief, that accessibility can be broadly classified into physical infrastructure accessibility and ICT accessibility. What is the definition of accessibility? Anyone wants to try now that you've understood what it is? Okay. So accessibility is, you can understand it as the measure of a product so that it can be accessed as effectively by a person without a disability and a person with a disability. So the effective access should be the same. Whether it's a product or a service or a device, access should be equal and equally easy and equally effective. I just explain some key concepts associated with accessibility. When we're talking about physical accessibility, we refer to infrastructure like ramps, lifts with buttons, auditory signals, etc. When we're talking about ICT accessibility, we're talking about assistive technology, which is technology which helps or assists persons with disabilities to access the internet, which we just listed out right now. There is another very important concept called reasonable accommodation and another called universal design. What does this mean? Universal design means that a product from its very inception is designed so that it can be accessed by both persons with disabilities and without disabilities. So you don't need any additional efforts or any reverse engineering or anything to be done for it to be accessed by others. For example, your keyboard with 2 keys, it can be accessed by blind people and then nothing extra needs to be done for it. There is a concept of reasonable accommodation, which means that in some cases this is not done or it cannot be done. In that instance, you take a little extra effort, but not so much that it causes undue hardship to that person who's doing it, and you ensure that an alternative accessible copy is available. For example, we discussed the PDF image yesterday, which was a scanned image. The extra effort could be OCRing that image and putting an accessible copy up, or even just put up the doc version of a Word document or a text version or an HTML version of the content of that PDF, inaccessible PDF image. So that's an alternative to what is available, and that's done by reasonable accommodation. So these are some important concepts one has to bear in mind when one is talking about ICT accessibility. Just open up my presentation now. I need this. Wow. Standards yesterday, and just like other things, accessibility also has some standards. We've talked about assistive technology. So what happens once we have the means to access the internet? What else comes in our way? The interface, that is the website, the content, what is on the website. So now we need standards for these to ensure that they work with our assistive technology. So when we're talking about the interface, here we're talking about WCAG, which is called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which has been developed by the World Wide Web Consortium. It's an open standard, and one question which one always thinks is there are so many disabilities and everybody requires different, everybody has different requirements. So how do I make my website accessible? I can't think of everybody, and it may not be viable for me to, economically for my company, because I'm a very small company, to think of everybody and put captions, etc., etc. So what do I do? So if you adhere to these guidelines, 2.0, WCAG 2.0, and they have different levels, AA, AA, AAA, different levels of compliance. So even if you subscribe to the minimum level of compliance of these guidelines, you can be sure that your website will be accessible to some degree to every person with a disability, whether they're accessing it directly or with the help of some assistive technology. So the guidelines are technical. So if you're a web developer, you should definitely go through them. But otherwise, there are some really simple principles which are there in the guidelines, such as if you have an image, you have to describe what the image is. So if I have a screen reader and it just sees some image, like a captcha, I'm not going to be, my screen reader is based on artificial intelligence. It's not going to be able to process what it is and describe it to me. So always wherever, and it's called an alt tag, alternative, description for every image. Another very important criteria, always mark up your documents. So you're not just putting bold and highlighting or capital, but you have heading levels. And why is it useful? Because if I have to navigate down arrow by down arrow through an entire web page, actually you should try doing this, and I'm going to ask you to find some information. It's going to take you ages. So if you have heading levels, your screen reader can directly jump from one heading to the other. So you have a list of headings which comes up, and you know exactly what you want, where you want to go. So these are the kind of criteria which are there in the guidelines, and they are simple to follow. If you design your website right from the beginning to be WCAG compliant, it's not much more expensive, which is what is usually a worry for people. Maybe 2% more. But if you have to do it again, it's almost like redoing the website. So it's good to do that right up front. Another standard is DAISY. DAISY is a standard for digital books. So traditionally, how did blind people or visually impaired people read books? Braille versions. How big is a Braille book? Okay. Okay, if it's a 50-page book, how much would it weigh? And you have to read it there because you can't carry it home, no? It's very big. So then after Braille, audio, books on tape. Okay, so you have a book, a big fat book, and it's about 200 pages. It's about 10 tapes. How would you go to page number 156? You start frantically listening to all the tapes, right? Unless you like put a sketch mark on this and that, and the red tape has page 156.
Using these devices, and there will be hundreds and thousands of songs, and they choose the song which may
Songs is different. We're talking about books.
books.
Huh.
Currently,
Right. So that's exactly what I'm saying. So DAISY is about marking up your book. If you have not marked up your book, how will you go to that? There's no, it's just like one file. Yes. So DAISY has 6 types of DAISY books. You have audio and text, or text only, or audio only, depending upon well, the level of technology competence which you have and the resources which you have, and the kind of readership of your library. For example, if you have a DAISY library, and you have a file which can connect the audio and the text, and you can navigate to any words or any comma anywhere in the file. So this is a really good way to read, but it's also expensive and time consuming, and we have a DAISY Forum of India, which is about 86 organizations which are converting books into DAISY, but yeah, there are hardly as many books as there are in the market. So we have a long way to go, but it's definitely the up and coming technology. But if you cannot afford any of this, you just have something in HTML, you just have something in text, it works, because at least it's readable. You have EPUB. DAISY is nothing but XML, well marked up XML, but you have to have a DAISY player, and you have to have DAISY tools to create it. You have open source versions of that available if you're, ready to work on that. But in case you aren't and you're lazy or you don't want to do it, just HTML will work, I think. Sorry? No, not video. Yes? A proprietary software is more advanced than open source technologies. So the project where we developed, and we'll develop NVDA to bring in critical functionality so that we can use Indian languages on that. Now that's a big problem for us. We don't have text-to-speech to access content in Indian languages, and we don't really have Indian languages, Indian language content in Unicode font, which is what you need to access it with a screen reader, which is the other standard which is on my list. If something is in Unicode font, any assistive technology can, the screen reader can understand it. If it's in some fancy font, it's absolutely useless. So what's our problem with this project is that it's a complex software, so it's taking a lot of time to develop. To fix bugs, it's taking 2 months, 3 months, when we had anticipated that we do like 3 a month and something like that. And we are not getting people who are interested in working on this project because it's not a lucrative long-term thing. So we started last August. We have one person who's working on it part-time. We have interns coming in and going, and that's good because it's capacity building, they're learning. But in terms of contributing to that project of developing NVDA, we are very slow. We're making progress, but very slow. So we'd be very grateful to work on this project. The other thing we are also working on, since I'm talking about the NVDA project, is that we are developing text-to-speech for about 15 Indian languages, and we've done it for Bangla, Malayalam, and enhanced a bit on Hindi, and one more. I can't remember. I'll get back to you on that. So the 4 languages, and this is eSpeak, which is another open source synthesizer. The flip side, if you're going to listen to it every day, which you may have to if you don't have a choice, is that it's a very mechanical sounding voice. So, and that's what usually comes with NVDA, as opposed to JAWS, which I can switch on later on and you can see it's a very human sounding voice. So, but still, for people who don't have anything, if suddenly we have people, and we have 63 million people who are blind in India, 63 million, it's not a small amount. And then we have all these illiterate people who will also be able to use this technology. So there's a lot to be done in this area, and a lot of ground to be covered and a lot of people required. So feel free to jump in and help out or do whatever you want with this information. Things you're using. Just look at this page. How did email start? How did transmitter start? How did a typewriter come? Shall I go to the next page? Some of the most basic technologies which we are using today started because of accessibility reasons, including email. Okay, these are examples of physical accessibility. I think we have listed them out before itself, so there's no need to ramps and transportation, low flow buses, etc. So all these examples we have listed out, but you could just go through it again if you want. This is done. Web accessibility. Okay. This is what we're talking about right now. And I will play another video. One sec.
When I was 14, I lost my sight, and I just remember I was going, like, surfing the web, and it was just so much easier. Like, I like to get on it so much more. And now it's just so frustrating because you can't see the graphics and, like, what's going on sometimes, and it's just frustrating.
I use the internet connected to school subjects quite often, and I use it for projects and tests. But also one of my most recent projects, the only way I could get it done was to go to google.com. All the other recommended websites were not very accessible.
Without captions, it's hard to understand what they're doing. I just have to try and make it up. With captions, I know exactly what's going on. I know the specifics of what they're talking about.
It's kind of hard to be required to do something and not be able to do it, and you have to find somebody else to come and help you do it on their own time.
And I can't navigate by myself. And I like to be independent. It gives me a feeling of pride. And it is also slower if somebody needs to help me, which they would.
And something that would help out a lot of visually impaired people is just for that person to go the extra step, which isn't much at all, to make the web.
Access these websites. So hearing that this is just going through the same stuff again. Can you hold this? Okay, these are examples of two inaccessible websites. One is has a capture, which if you're deaf you can't use. If you're blind you can't use. And one is something which is not marked up. So just to give you a little background on the examples, at CIS we've been very closely following guidelines for web accessibility by NIC when we started off at 2008. So we've been going to DIT, that is the Department of Information and Technology, now DEIT. Why? And working on a draft electronic accessibility policy, which has been a draft also for a very long time, and which talks about using Unicode, website, WCAG, everything. NIC came out with the guidelines on advisory guidelines for government websites, I think it was called, in 2009, February 2009. Sorry, 2010, and it said that all government websites have to be accessible. What we did in 2008 is we just randomly took up 22 important websites like railways, Indian Airlines, bus, DTC, whatever, and we checked, and apart from one, which is RBI, none of them were accessible. So to follow up, last year, we decided that 5 years have gone by and we have this policy, nice policy in place, and let's see how much we have progressed from that time. So we decided to check all government websites. There are 7,800 of them. If you go to goidirectory.com, gov.in something, yeah, sorry. We harvested these websites from different state government portals and everything, and we got a list of 7,800. So we got this team together and we said, you do these many, you do these many, and you do these. What we found out is that 1,985 websites didn't open at all. That's more than 25%. More than 95% are inaccessible. Say 52 of them have a color contrast option, for example, 52 out of 7,800. And average errors per homepage is about 500. So some just for the homepage. And we ran a tool. So upfront, I'd say a tool is not the way to do a comprehensive test of any website. It gives you an idea that there are errors. But to be fair, suppose there is a description. The tool will say there's a description. But if there's a picture of a dog and it says it's a cat, the tool is not going to be able to tell you that. So you have to do some amount of manual testing and you have to do some amount of automated testing. And given that we had such a large sample size of 7,800 websites, obviously we didn't check all the pages and we didn't do a very rigorous test. But it took us almost a year, also because people were working on and off on this. It can be very tiring. And we found out that most of these websites are inaccessible, and we sent this report to all state governments, and we sent it to all departments in the center, and now we are giving it to everybody we see, including you all. I think Ajay is going to be giving the reports. So it's also just to show that when we are that we need policy intervention. Sometimes it's not always voluntary, and we need to have policies in place to implement accessibility. But even when we have a policy, we need to monitor and to check, and there are different ways of doing it. You can send RTI and ask one ministry, is your website accessible, and they'll not reply. You can appeal and they'll not reply, and you can appeal again and they'll not reply. Or they'll say, we're not the right person, go there. That they'll tell you within 30 days. And then they'll say you're not the right person, and then you say, no, we're not accessible, and they can be honest or say we're accessible. But there are different tools to do that. And for the first time, we did we're not per se a very technical organization, but we do work with a lot of people. And I think this was very useful because based on this, I think Sunil has now been called to a committee to revise these guidelines, and this book is very useful to all of them in the committee. And that's how the detailed data is also available on our website for each of the websites we tested. On the CIS website, you have the original data. Mobile accessibility and web accessibility, W3C has a wing called Web Access Initiative, WAI, and they're the ones who are responsible for the W3C guidelines, and they've come out with mobile best practices. And I'm just going to flip through some slides which will tell you that some of your very basic features in your mobile phones are actually very important accessibility options for persons with different disabilities. Hearing, so visual alerts, call logs, all these you have. But you wouldn't have thought that they're so critical for people with hearing disability. There's a person called Mohammed Jemni in Tunisia, and he developed a very innovative software which he's willing to give to anybody if they will use it. It's called Avatar, Sign Language Avatar. And that's targeted at deaf illiterate. What one would not realize is that out of all the disabilities, I think deaf persons are severely uneducated. And even though we have sign language, A, it's not standardized, especially in India across different states. And B, that very few people know it. So even if you are saying you can message, they are not going to be able to read that message. So this person in Tunisia, his device is called Avatar, and what it does, of course, you have to have really good bandwidth, etc. Is that anybody can just sign, and it goes like ding, to the next person, and they can just reply again back through sign language. So that's very popular over there, and it's a very good solution. I mean, whether or not you're literate, it's very useful. Avatar? Either you have different symbols and you can create a sign, or you can also just sign and that will get transmitted as an avatar to the other person. So other person gets like some Fido-Dido kind of thing doing it's image. Yeah, like that. But if it goes up and down really fast, you can't say it's an image. It's like some. I think it's a Raku Raku phone, if I'm not mistaken. So Raku Raku phone is a phone device by NTT Docomo. After they figure out that the market is saturated in Japan, and what do we do to ensure that we are far ahead of the other people? So they did a survey and they found out that most of the people who were not using phones and on the internet were people either who were really old or illiterate or disabled. So they came out with this whole line of accessible feature phones and accessibility services like libraries and downloadable books and everything. And I just and they captured 60% of the market share. In 3 years they sold 15 million handsets. What I discovered a month ago is when I got this new dongle, Tata Docomo dongle in India, is that even their see, even this is so high contrast, and that's probably because Tata partnered with NTT Docomo. I don't know. Okay. So these are the options for dexterity, and again, using a lot of them are mainstream features. You don't really require any. Okay, so I'll tell you another interesting thing. A new project which we thought we'd do, and it seems to have failed right before we started. Because what we thought was that we should have an Android phone with a numeric keypad, and then we'll have an app and it'll download books from all accessible apps, because all apps are not accessible for persons with screen readers. And then we can just download books from libraries and online bookstores like you have a Kindle app. And why do we need a numeric keypad is because we will put that text-to-speech, which we are developing on 15 languages. And you can key in different alphabets with different key combinations. So for the past month, we've been looking in Indian market, Chinese market, everywhere. And apparently, numeric keypad phones are no longer there. There's just touch phone with Android. There's no numeric keypad, numeric phone with Android. We've written to Huawei and said, listen, you had this model 2 years ago, and can you get us some 8,000 phones like that? And they said, we don't do it anymore. It's just gone, and it's all touch everywhere, just because people in America are very happy, blind people in America are very happy with iPhones. So we don't have numeric keypad Android-based phones. So just an example of small little things which are happening and we don't realize it, but it's actually going backwards in accessibility. And a whole lot of people are really, blind people are really worried about this new phenomenon of no options with numeric keypads, because they still prefer touch. Touching their keypad, because if I'm on an iPhone and I just touch the screen, I have to wait for feedback from that screen to tell me what I'm pressing. And that's not the case with buttons. I know exactly what I'm pressing, so if I'm standing out and it's really loud and some marriage is happening and I can't hear a thing, I still know I'm calling the police. Okay, so there are really help the cause of accessibility. One is relay service, of course. I think most of you would have heard of it. Anybody wants to try? I'm just talking and I'm just scared. you're not paying attention. Anyone wants to try what relay service is? Yes, from where? Somebody said yes. You.
No. You want to try?
No, I'm asking if anybody knows what relay service is.
No, no.
Okay. Anybody wants to hazard a guess as to what relay service is?
Yes, it must be relay means passing the message, so I guess somebody must be translating or communicating in a different way when the message comes to them, to a person with an accessibility problem.
Right, correct. So I am a deaf person and I need to talk to somebody else, and there's this person in between who's taking my message, which I'm keying in, and they'll give it to them. If it's another deaf person, they may send it back by text, or if it's a non-deaf person, they may just talk, and then that person will talk back, and then this will get relayed back. So you have relay service in many countries, not yet in India. Maybe it could be one of the proposals under the USOF. So that's one service for deaf. For the blind, there are a lot of useful services like navigation. Most of you have it on your smartphones. So it's going to tell you go walk 50 meters here and 500 meters there and turn a right and take a left. It's the flip side to it is that if there's suddenly a metro being constructed and your phone does not know it, it will send you to the wrong place if you cannot see it. But otherwise, it's good. Then you have books. Lots of books you can download from libraries. You have Daisy books you can download from online libraries like Bookshare. And you can purchase it off others like Caliber, and there are lots of them. So there are all these services which are available. What are other some of the big companies doing? AT&T is doing a lot. Yeah. So this is Relay by AT&T. Okay, this is navigation. We've covered that. So what also customers are go in, and it's high contrast, and there are non-skid tiles. So there's a whole range of things which they're doing, and I'd be happy to share this. This slides will be up on the institute website by the end of the week. Remote customer care. Can you explain? That's, yeah. You're talking about instead of IVR? So I think in a country like India, either you have all this relay service in place, which helps you access customer care, right? Like in a country like Australia or US or wherever. Or you have text tele typewriters there. But I think in a country like India, even if service providers just say, message me your problem, and I will send a message back for educated deaf. I don't think it would cater to uneducated deaf. But for educated deaf, I think that's definitely a simple and completely economically viable proposition. Yes.
There is this keyboard being developed by a couple of people called Flexi, if I'm not wrong. It's a very interesting, it's a keyboard for touch screens which is meant for the visually impaired. And it's being tested very well. It has 98% success rate till now, which is very good. And it's basically, the idea is that you can type completely normally without ever looking at your phone. So you don't need to actually look at it. So it's actually a very interesting thing that might be good to check out. It's being developed. It's a keyboard which obviously iOS does not support external keyboards, but Android does. So I think they're testing them right now. It's an app that I have right now on the iOS. But after it is being completely tested and after that has happened, it will be deployed as a regular keyboard for all phones that support it.
We should think of that for our failed proposal. Already talked about. This is how it looks. We leave talking about the technology. Is that it's very important for you to work with persons with disabilities and to understand their needs before you think of solutions. a big error which a lot of people, including the government, does is to think they can define the problem and spend lakhs and crores of money on a project, and they think they're doing it for the disabled. One example is there is an IIT which was funded big time, to work on a special browser for the blind. And we discovered it quite accidentally when we went there for another project. And we said, hey, we are already being using Mozilla and Internet Explorer for the past 5 years. Why are you designing a separate browser for the blind? So what I'm saying is, if they had bothered to check with the community first, their expertise and time and money would have been spent more usefully designing something else which is more required. For example, a refreshable braille display. What is that? That is a device in which instead of, if you don't like listening and you are not able to remember, and many of you will relate to that, you need to have things written down. So a blind person can have a braille display and the dots will keep coming up and down, and they're literally reading. That device costs 50,000 in India, just one device. So I mean, they could have been working on bringing down that price. And this is just an example, but I think it's a very critical point to work with the community and understand their needs rather than defining the needs yourself. Yeah, okay. So I'm talking about accessibility policy, last part of the presentation. Why I'm talking about it is that even though there's a business case, clearly nobody's doing it. We are not going anywhere with voluntary adoption. Not anywhere, not completely, but very few percentage of people are adopting web accessibility or working on that. So we need a mix of policy plus voluntary adoption to make this work. So we go and talk to somebody and they're very sympathetic and yes, we are going to work on it. 2 days later, it's gone. So you can't be badgering people all the time. And for the government, clearly there has to be a policy in place, and then they will, with a lot of nudging and a lot of monitoring and badgering, they will, and of course, very often the departments themselves are keen to do it, but they don't have the expertise. That's a sad fact. You have a policy, but you don't have anybody who knows how to implement it. For example, we submitted a note on broadcasting accessibility, and yeah, they're interested in it, but there's nobody on Doordarshan who can implement it. They don't know what it's about. So, we have to build capacity, and just talking about policy is not enough, but we have to start with a policy as well, because unless there's a policy, there won't be a need to build capacity. So it's like a chicken and egg thing. And we've been working on this electronic policy, and how we started is that we gave the government examples of what different countries are doing. For example, US is a very much quoted example, Section 508, they have an access board, they implement web accessibility very stringently. They have a scorecard and everybody has to voluntarily, give a compliance. They have any procurement also, you have to say that I comply with your 508 requirements, and only then they'll be considered for any government contract. So US has a lot of measures in place. UK, I'd say, is an even better example than US, and now they've recently amended their laws also, not just because they have a separate statute on web accessibility, they also have a better practice guide on mobile accessibility, which I haven't seen in any other country. And another interesting thing is that they are forcing private enterprises also to comply with these guidelines, not just the government. So then you find different kinds of initiatives in different countries. So like Australia, Canada and all, their policy is restricted to websites. But in some countries like Germany and UK, it may not just be websites, it may be all electronic infrastructure. So there's different approaches to policy making, but I'm not going to talk about that now here, but what I'd really be very excited about talking is how you, if you want to get your government, your state government, you should want that to come out with a policy saying all the state government websites should be accessible. How would you go about it? Anyone wants to try? If you're asking your state government that they should come out with a notification or a policy that all government websites should be accessible, what's your plan? Okay, and which sector? Can you describe?
You have to create a coalition. Yeah, it's absolutely, because then it's that your work becomes that much easier. So first whatever you want to achieve, you create a coalition for that. And that coalition should include, the media, the editors, the stakeholders, and those responsible for making that policy happen. So once you create a coalition, then the question is how to keep the issue alive till you actually achieve what you want to achieve. So that's one way to go. Target the right people. So that's why I would do it that way.
Multi-stakeholder. That's one. Any other?
See, I subscribe to the NIC newsletter on web guidelines. I don't know whether it is enforced or it is just a
W3C. W3C.
But they seem to be making some small snippets and then sending it out.
Yeah. They did that.
That's not mandated, is it?
That's a W3C India. They are just awareness raising.
Okay.
No? Anyone wants to try? You're going to meet the secretary with a bunch of multi-stakeholders. And what are you going to do there? Okay, so
behind this to kind of like technical personnel especially to design websites such that it's accessible. First they need to be educated, trained.
So we trained 3,000 NIC staff.
That has to be done, otherwise there is no way.
I agree, but how do you initiate the discussion? What I am just trying to make a point is that I'm shifting away from the topic of accessibility a little to how you, because here we are all interested in reform and we are all interested in contributing to that reform. So I'm just, and this will be covered in some other session, I'm sure, but just since we worked on that process with some departments, I just thought it would be useful and to share how I worked on the accessibility policy. The first thing which any government person would ask is that show me best practices. What are other countries doing and how successful have they been? They may come out with some policy which is entirely their own. But the process is that you go with a well-researched, well-documented note telling them that this is the problem. These many people, 1 billion people in the world have a problem. 150 million in India have disabilities and 63 million are blind, whatever stats you can dig up, the bigger the better, the more, correct stats. And then that's why you need to do, and you have an obligation, India has an obligation, and I think I missed that part, is that we have signed the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which means that we have to make information and communication technologies, internet, new media accessible. We are obliged to under that. We are obliged to enact laws to give effect to the treaty. So a government has an obligation, and then prepare whatever is the body you're approaching. Either if it's directly the department, we should tell them that you have to come out with guidelines, and these are the guidelines and what we need for this state and this language. One example of this is Madhya Pradesh government. They brought out a circular in Hindi, and they said that they would have all their government websites should be accessible as per WCAG 2.0, and content should be in Unicode format. So I think that's really one big step for any state government. They're not yet. They just came out with the policy. They're not yet compliant. So that will take time, but you have to have a policy first. Then is the capacity building, then awareness raising with the other department. You go to one department, and I'll give you an example. You're talking about education, you go to MHRD, and they say, "Arey, disability wala, you go MSJ mein jao na, idhar nahi hai." But education is their domain. So, to even get departments to talk to each other and work together, that will take time. But I'm just talking about the policy process. Then we do have to have capacity building, and we do have to have monitoring like we did with that survey. So I guess that's mostly what I wanted to say about policy making, and
if anybody has any questions, with that I'm going to conclude my talking. If anybody wants to share thoughts, has questions, ideas, wants to start working on NVDA, please.
Is it possible to also kind of create a more, what is it? Kind of using a pressure group tactics by organizing various organizations working with disabled people or organizations of disabled people themselves, and creating a larger network of actual users who would be benefiting from this particular policy change?
Yeah,
I know that's a lot of mobilization work, but still, is that a...
No, it's already done. We have very advanced networks of disability organizations working on different groups. So we have already the coalitions you're speaking of, working on different issues, working on the rights of persons with disabilities bill. We have this coalition which is intervening on any policy on behalf of accessibility. So if it's an emergency number response system getting discussed in track, you go there and you say that for persons with disabilities also emergency response is important. Like in Europe, they have 112, which is a standard number anybody with a disability can use. Like that in India, you have to have an easy number which doesn't stay and which person's disability can use. So we have a group which is intervening in every sector, A, of pure disability, or B, of any mainstream policy where a need for accessibility is there. So that is there, but it's still taking time, and it still needs more pushing. And sometimes, despite your best pushing efforts, what is happening with the electronic policy? There was a draft 2 years ago, and then it went for, I was on the drafting committee, you got comments from all ministries, and there was sometimes even nothing related to accessibility in there. One ministry saying you have to give employment 3%. That has nothing to do with an accessibility policy, but we are sitting and considering what to do with that remark. So all that got finalized, it went to the cabinet, it came back again for no reason, then the joint secretary changed, then again they asked us for the same paper we gave in the beginning, which so many countries are doing what, then again it got finalized, then again it went to all ministries, and now another person's come, and now he's again asked me for the same paper 4 years later or 5 years later, which I again sent him. So, despite your best effort, it just doesn't happen, or it will take time and we just have to be patient, but we can't give up. So, anybody else, any questions? Or? No? Everyone's clear? Yeah.
Since we are as a technology moving towards touch devices, and that seems to just be happening across the world, are there any touch specific accessibility aids being developed or in process that we know of? Touch phones or touch devices specific?
I'm thinking when you're saying touch is mostly Android or iPhone.
Pretty much.
What's happening, yeah, smartphones. And they both have their inbuilt screen reader. That's for blind people. And for others, yeah, they can use their hands or speech recognition. That's already there in those phones. They're smart. They're really smart.
Right,
but
so,
they just don't suit us sometimes.
Right.
So I think if... Yeah.
So I want to mention one more disability, like whatever it's not like the blind or vision impaired. So there's one more category, it's called print impaired. So I mean, they are like, even though they are educated or like they know how to read and write, some people like the print impaired who are called, like, they cannot understand the content of the web. What is there around?
So print impaired covers the whole umbrella of disabilities, which includes the blind. But print impaired can also include illiterate because they can't read print. Dyslexia, autism, because they're looking at it but it's just looking very jumbled. So for that, some little solutions we have, like you have images where you have text, you try to simplify your web interface. You don't have flashes too much. Suppose somebody gets seizure just looking at the flash. So these kind of solutions are there. But what specific solution is that we can simplify content and we can simplify the websites. But more than that, we can't do. If you can give me a specific example, that would be helpful.
Like we have developed a tool called Alapi. Like so, like what that does is like it takes a web page. Suppose a domestic worker wants to know like what laws are available for them, like what kind of articles or laws are. So they don't understand if you just say that. This is the particular law you have, like overtime breaks you can claim and all, but they cannot understand a normal domestic worker, like she cannot understand like this law, what does it mean. So we give them a specific, simplify the content for them, and tell them like, okay, with the images and like with most real examples, like if you work for overtime, you with you can claim these, you can actually claim for more breaks and all. So simplify the content in their language or in a simple terms, like where they can understand by themselves. So such kind of things.
Yes, there are. You answered your own question. So you simplify the content. There are different tools, lot of tools getting developed.
There are not many tools yet. Nobody, what I've seen is not many people are able to read this part of.
Correct. There aren't many people working on accessibility. There are solutions, like I saw once in Dubai, somebody had a solution where anything which is in text, it just suddenly pops up like an image and somebody can understand. But they are not uniformly available across the world. Then there's a language problem, so we have to develop solutions indigenously. All solutions outside will not work here. And we do need people working on accessibility issues, which is one of the reasons why we're talking about it here, is that there's very less awareness and we need more initiatives. And it's just a start. But I agree with you, there are a lot more problems which don't have solutions, and we need to work on these solutions. For example, what? The government policy is separate, but policy will talk about giving assistive technology, providing aids, working on R&D. No, so that people will have to work, individual NGOs, state governments will have to identify the needs and work on it. It cannot be addressed in a policy. That, each disability, each thing, it just goes on. Even the standards may not be addressed in the policy because they can get upgraded and changed, right? So maybe there is a committee, I don't know what comes out, and when the policy comes out, I'm scared talking about it and committing it to it now. But maybe there will be a committee which is reviewing standards and which is, identifying needs on an ongoing basis, which is what will have to be done, because otherwise your policy will have to keep changing. And to just get one policy is so difficult, changing it is going to be even more difficult.
The policy you said will take time, but the simple thing of, since you've given them the report about all these websites, can't they at least start correcting, all these government websites that don't work? At least has work begun in that sphere?
They should, and I think since Sunil is there, can you talk about what your committee is doing on the website guidelines?
The personnel and training. Under the very same ministry, there is yet another department called DA and Public Grievances. Yes. So this department years ago, and over the last 3 years, there has been very little compliance, not just with the accessibility related standard, which is WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guideline. But with many of the other, what they are wondering is, should they reduce the size of the document? Should they just focus on the most important things? because at the moment, to be in compliance, there are some 80 or 90 different standards like WCAG that you have to comply with. So they're wondering, should they reduce the number of standards that are mandated in the document? They are wondering, should we make compliance only mandatory for new projects? Can all the existing websites and e-governance infrastructure of the Indian government remain as it is? Should we only make it mandatory for the new projects? They are asking, should we have any incentive mechanisms if a particular government does well and is in full compliance? How do we reward that behavior? They are asking, should we give the policy more teeth? Should there be some punitive measures? Should people be fined personally, institutionally? Should budgets be reduced in case they do not comply with the standard? They are wondering whether some infrastructure can be put into place to automatically check websites. So one of the requirements is that the website should be updated on a regular basis. This can be easily done. We can write a little piece of software that pulls down the homepage of all the 7,000 government websites, and we can check whether there has been any update since yesterday or since last week. So there's a whole range of questions. They are very concerned that there is very little compliance. But unfortunately, DARPG or DAPRG, DARPG, they're not part of the command and control, and therefore other ministries and departments don't necessarily have to listen to them. The policy will become really mandatory only when it's law. So this is the soft approach, trying to convince people through best practice, convince people through capacity building to be in compliance with globally accepted standards. But whether this will work and whether the second iteration with a reduced list of criteria, with some punitive measures, with some incentive mechanisms, whether this will all happen as planned, we don't know. But as a research organization, CIS is contributing to the redrafting. One specific thing that we hope to do is run a survey, and we want to ask the government webmasters where the challenges are and why they are not able to comply. We want to ask the vendors. Some of these websites are not made by NIC, some of them are made by TCS and some other big companies, CMS. So we want to ask them, has there been an issue with complying to the standards, and how should the standards be fixed? Then we also want to survey the general public and find out what challenges, what issues they have when they browse the 7,000 government websites. So this survey, NIC said they will give it to us as a small contract, but they still haven't gotten back. But if they do, and since it's an official survey of NIC, it will be an interesting survey to run and to find out some more details on why our websites do not comply to global standards. So that is an update from the committee that we are serving on now.
Okay, so I think I'll wind up now, and thanks for your attention. If there are any questions or any information you need, I'm here all the time. So just catch hold of me whenever you see me and ask. Is that okay? Okay, thanks. Lunchtime.